Well, hello, this is Dr. Chris Lamont. I'm just answering some questions. I've got emails on from several different students concerning a wellness code webinar that's out there that's available if anybody's interested in it. Most certainly, you can check out my website. It's wizardscache.com. It's WIZARDSCACHE. Or just search Chris Lamont. That's Chris with two S's and Lamont with, that's like lemon with two M's. I'm out there somewhere. I don't think I make much of a push for notoriety, but you know, I've bumped into a few people in my life, and I've been bouncing around ideas for a long time. Some of the things in the past I've kind of danced around and avoided answering because they're abstract ideas that become useful to me. I hate to program someone to think things are a certain way. Things aren't really so much a certain way. Oh yeah, I know. It's like 2 + 2 is 4, whatever. Those are all assignments. The way I look at it, it's kind of like we assign things to things so they become very useful. I have personally assigned some things to things that have become very useful for me. But you know, it doesn't mean it is that way. It doesn't mean it even worked that way for you. There may be more variables involved. So there's a lot of differentiation. We humans are more the same than different, but most certainly we're uniquely different too. So the question that come up to me is like, could you talk a little bit about, you talk about energy flow and energy over here and energy over there. And so what is all these forms of psychic energy that you talk about? Well, I never think of myself as very much New Age or believing in anything. I'm not really sure that I believe in an awful lot of science. It's all very useful. I mean, when I'm saying believing in, I'm not so sure we can secure into it. I think we've all been on this planet long enough. Most certainly I've probably been around longer than most of you, is that science changes its mind and new data comes in. There's more diversity that comes up. So I'm not really big at locking into components of ideas and think, well, that's the way it is. Although I most certainly get accused of that because I have a huge database that I use as a resource, but I don't believe it necessarily to be true. I believe it to be useful, right? You have to remember the word respect comes from the idea of something being useful. So I respect my components as useful tools. I don't necessarily believe in an absolute truth. So therefore, I don't think of them as true. It works for me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what works for me that may not answer somebody's question who's seeking the meaning of life. So sorry about that. But anyway, let's go with this. The first energy that I notice in people is something that seems to stream through them. My dear friend Michael Adler wrote a song called Wind in Your Head. I kind of came from a discussion about that energy that's like a breeze that blows through you. We have a relationship with movement on this universe. So there's a sense or a breeze that blows through you. I've worked with a lot of people in hospice, a lot of people injured. They want to call that healing. I call that counseling, whatever. I notice when there's no movement in there, when they become just static, it's probably not a really good sign, right? Because they're usually not going to be around very long. And that's not an errant. Once again, it's not a rules. It's just an experience I've had, right? When you start to look at things, they show up in symbols. If we're universal, then it becomes relatively safe to assign some meaning to that. But even when you look at nerves and body parts and organs, we all vary a little bit. So it's like, don't get too stuck on any of this, once again. But this streaming, this sense of an energy blowing through you, people have had visions of a column or energy flowing into them or light coming into them or whatever this silliness was that they got a perception of. And when I say silliness, I'm saying silliness in the sense of that it's just an experience. You can have a communication about your experience, but I don't think you should market it as a rule. That's the caution I put into everything. So I have had the experience of a stream, a flow of energy. And when I communicate, what I teach is a technique in entrainment put the bias of you aside and just relax and just kind of imagine you're kind of in the flow with the next person. Experience what they're experiencing for a second without any judgment. So I'm sitting there and I can feel that stream and I can go, wow, when I put the package called me aside, I now become more aware of your stream and of you. I've made you more important for a second than me. So I then feel that stream in you, like, wow, that's interesting. And if I feel a deviation or something in that stream, then I could start to have a communication about that. We could have a talk about that. And as we talk, I could watch that, feel that stream, and notice what affects it or not. And I could then put an emphasis on what's affecting that. I don't even want to use the word correcting it, most certainly changing it, increasing the stream, perhaps, decreasing the stream, perhaps, if you're anxious. Whatever. It shows up. I think it's always there. When I look for it, I always find it. I don't always notice it unless I look for it. Sometimes it volunteers. When it reveals itself or volunteers, I interpret that as, oh, I should pay attention, right? Makes sense. So that first one is a stream that goes through you. The second one we taught in spiritual awareness class for, 300-400 people down through the years. And I've taken it from other classes of people. And it's just a connection to the planet, to the universe. We connect with our feet chakras, the little energy centers at your bottom. The Chinese call it bubbling brook. I think it's acupressure point. And it allows us to be connected to the universe, to the planet. It makes us a little more real because we're wanting to call this real. I don't perceive it necessarily as real, but it's more reliable than our thinking. So it's good. So when we're connected to that, it gives us a little sense of pacing. It gives us a connection to the planet. It makes us a little more grounded, all those terms you've heard before. So having that energy flow up to your feet and running through whatever silly patterns that you want to make up, it's producing a relationship between the energy of the planet we live on and us, and it makes us connected more to our story of reality. That's the value in it. If that connection is not there, pretty much I've worked with enough multi-personality people, crazy people, people caught up in fantasies. Boy, it's hard to find that connection with them lots of times. Hysterical people don't have that connection. I can get them grounded a little bit. Sometimes you got to shake them a little bit, right? And you've heard that someone's hysterical, you slap them, and it's like, that's a connection to the planet, not a nice one. Much better if your feet are connected, because most of us stand on our feet, and it's easy to say connect your feet. If you're sitting down, we'd have to say connect your butt. That might be misinterpreted. So connect your feet's an easy way to talk about it and kind of get an energy flowing through a pattern. I have students out there that teach the concepts I taught. They alter them. I don't know if they alter them. It all seems to work. It doesn't much matter. So the second psychic energy, psychic just means a force, right? The second psychic energy that I notice that runs a pattern is connection to the planet. That's the second one I talk about. The ascending, descending columns been around in history forever and a day. I think even Ken Wilber has a book on some of that material. It's like, I call that a communication. It's almost as if a flow comes into you. There's two streams coming down through you. Once again, a different level of streaming. It feels like a communication. When there's something going on, when somebody's talking about a dream or revelation or a story, it's almost, or imagining, it feels like there's a stream of data flowing into them. When they're sharing something, it feels like there's a stream of data. I've sat there in libraries reading to kids, volunteered my time, and I could sit there and I could feel when I'm done, like this side of my body felt different than the other side, because for the last 40 minutes I've been reading, and it's just been streaming out. Not only am I reading the words in the book, but I'm dramatically reading them. Yeah, me dramatically reading. Yeah, I can do it sometimes. It most certainly has a flow that starts to come out, and I'm engaged more of the essence of who I am and flowing with that story. And I can feel that. It's like I've overworked one channel. It doesn't make them real, but it makes them useful, right? So I can get a sense of, is it flowing in? If I'm inherent in being the student, if I want to learn, if I'm attending to what you say, I need to shut up. I need to listen. I need to attend to that flow coming in. I need to attend to that flow coming out. Okay. A lot of times I'm attending to the flows coming in, and I'm ahead of you because I can read the flow much faster than you can articulate it. So that makes me kind of rude and obnoxious, and I cut people off occasionally. I should apologize for that, but I probably really don't. So if you need an apology, I'm really sorry. I really am. But I'll probably keep doing it. The nature of just pattern is what I'm going to blame it on. But sometimes I can remember to be really nice and respectful. So anyway, that's the nature of it, right? It's just this communication stream. I'm attending to it. I fully identify with it. And it just flows into me. And it feels like, God, it just feels like I just downloaded a whole book in 10 seconds. And I'm scrambling to try to put it in order. That takes about 10 seconds. And then it's all flowing back out. And the nature of the balance between the two, I'm constantly dancing between, oh, I feed something out and I hear what I'm saying. And then it feedback loops to me. And it's like, oh, wow. As soon as I put it out there and I'm in train with all those people, there's data coming back. It's never static. It's always in a flow. And so it's like, oh, by the time I get a sentence out, there's 7 sentences or 8 or 10 or 12 coming back. That's requiring more definition, requiring or requesting, or even demanding, all the above, right? And so then I get to respond to all that or not, right? And so that's more of what I'm living in rather than in the conscious dialogue that's going on. I'm more attending to that flow of things that's sitting in there in that type of an energy flow. All right. The next one that I work with quite a bit is what I call the creation energy of you. I think that we have the outpicturing, the story, the thing you're projecting out, the demonstration of you, which shows up to some degree in form, to some degree in abstract ideas, to some degree in becoming, to some degree in a story about past, which is just a list of objects. And then there's another energy that comes into the heart center. And it's almost like dropping rocks in a pond. It creates those little undulations that move out. Well, it doesn't start or stop. I think it's always there. But when we start to attend to it in there, I'll start to put my attention on it, and I can feel those undulations come out, a little wave that moves out. Now, it's really kind of funny because when I start to see them in different people, as I do in trainments, the waves, when you throw a rock on a pond, are pretty even, going out in undulations and fade off. But in a human, the undulations have a little pattern to them. They have high spots, low spots. They have a little reverberation. They're unique. I think those things called meta patterns show up in those undulations as a disruption. Or I've interpreted meta patterns as undulations or changes in undulations. It all seems to exist in the creation of you. The patterns that show up as meta patterns or patterns below patterns. There are patterns that influence patterns. What is the rhythm of you becoming conscious? What is the rhythm of you becoming present, right? We know that everything in this universe blinks. I had a student one time that says, why do you tell a silly story about things blinking? I said, well, because if you look under an electronic microscope, particles aren't stable, they blink. So if you're a particle, if you're an idea, if you look in the mirror and you see yourself as something, then you blink. It's like that AC bulb blinks. You don't see it. Your computer monitor blinks. You don't see it. So you blink. And she looked at me, she said, such a silly thing to say. And I'm going, wow. Okay. She can't apply that concept to her. She was a smart lady. She could apply it to science, but she couldn't apply it to her. We have a tendency to think of us as an idea separate from the world that we live in. That's the whole idea of teaching that grounding, that we're really this mass is part of I don't know if I am part of this world, but this mass is most certainly part of this world. I'm not all that sure what I am. But if I attend to that heart center and I start to get a sense of that form of psychic energy, that marker, I can get those undulations. Now that helps me because I can tell when people are in a growth change, and those meta patterns are starting to alter, change, deviate a little bit, or there's somebody influencing them and trying to form them into that. I can start to see that shows up in there. So I use it as a tool to be able to separate them out. I insert a little bit of a different time signature, different pacing, right? Think of it as rhythm in a song. You can take a song and you can sing it faster or slower. It's rhythm in a song. I look at that experience, that movement, and I change the rhythm a little bit. And then that separates them out. So useful tools. Not sure they really exist, but useful tools. All right? In a matrix of those components. And the fourth or fifth thing, the next thing that I reference into it is like, there's a sense of stillness out there. Really kind of comes from some of the Zen Buddhist books I've read. The idea of being able to have stillness as a reference rather than being still in here. Being still in here feels like you're putting a damper on life. I do have a meditation that I work with, making this still in here. I call it a death meditation. People don't particularly like it, but it does have some advantages. But the stillness outside has huge advantages. And I find that if I start to attend to these undulations, I start to feel that kind of that still, my reference is a still lake, right? Because I've been in enough mountains and hiking that I've come to a lake that's just totally still, no wind, there's no undulations, no bumps on it. It's just like a sheet of glass. Kind of amazing. You sit there and you're in a living world that's full of animals and bugs and birds flying by and things going on, and your brain is busy and your heart's working and all these systems are at play and your body doing whatsoever they're doing, and yet that lake is totally still. And being able to reference that stillness of the lake starts to reduce the demand load, what I call demand load. I don't have to respond to all of the stuff that's going on. I don't have to even attend to my heart rate. I don't have to attend to any of that. I can just get totally still and notice, respect. Remember, it's useful. Respect that it's all working. That gives me a moment of saying, wow, I can be so respectful that this complex process that I can't begin to understand is going on. It's like, wow, that's amazing. I don't have to do anything. Just be. So the act of being and the act of becoming are the two big things that we humans have to attend to. Being here now allows us to step up to the idea, not the knowing, but the idea, the imagined concept of becoming. That's the way it steps in. So those are the things that I would deem into as psychic energy, right? Whatever that term means, that's kind of the useful tool that I use to play with it. So if that answers your question, have fun with that. And thanks for the question.